All right. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the panel discussion on biases against local startup enablers, with the overarching question: how can we get more funding to local organizations? Our apologies for the small hiccups in entering the session, but I think everything has been sorted out now. So we really appreciate your interest and are excited for an engaging session. So my name is Karina. I am the Managing Director of Circle Innovation, and we are one of the organizations that are currently implementing the Whitebox program. So it's a 3-month pilot program spearheaded by the UK Kenya Tech Hub and Ministry of ICT. To support around 170 early stage and growth stage startups with technical support and also access to linkages and funding. So without much further ado, and also to make up a bit for the time, I would like to introduce and welcome Kevin Atibu, the Head of Innovation and Incubation of the ICT Authority, Kenya, to share a bit more on the Whitebox with us this morning. Kevin, welcome.
All right, thank you, Karina. I believe everyone can hear me. So good morning to all the participants. My name is Kevin Atibu, as I've been introduced by Karina. I'm the Head of Innovation and Incubation at ICT Authority. So just allow me a few seconds to just introduce the ICT Authority, which is a state organization under the Ministry of ICT, Innovation and Youth in Kenya. So the ICT Authority is mandated to implement some of the strategic national ICT projects, and some of them being the digital literacy program, which is a program that aims at impacting digital skills to learners. We also have the National Optic Fiber Backbone Infrastructure Project, which is for laying of the optic fiber for the entire country. And then, of course, we have the Whitebox program, just to mention a few. Today, I will be touching more on the Whitebox entrepreneur project, which is being implemented within the wider Whitebox program. So for that, I'll just share my screen just to take you through a few slides. Karina, if you don't mind, please allow me to be able to share my screen. I've been given 5 minutes to just quickly take you through the Whitebox program. So I will quickly get into it. And just as an introduction, so the Whitebox is an initiative by the government of Kenya. And what it does is try to leverage innovation so that it's able to grow the ICT industry, also to be able to offer better government services. We also aim at contributing to the economy, that is through an establishment of enterprises, and also through that also create job opportunities. The main focus in terms of the innovations that are supported are majorly on the Big Four agenda, but that doesn't mean that we don't support all the other innovations, just that we keep a close eye on the Big Four agenda innovations. In terms of the objectives for the Whitebox is to receive, evaluate, and then facilitate growth of viable Kenyan innovations until they grow to scale. We also introduce qualified innovations to government for adoption, and also to get investments from investors. We also do a lot of capacity building through our partner network, our network of partners, sorry. And lastly is to link innovators to market opportunities as they come. As a service, some of the things that we provide within Whitebox to the innovation ecosystem is a lot of co-creation and co-innovation, where we link innovators to be able to work together and then develop their innovation. We also provide the linkage to investors and mentors for our innovators. Then also provide innovation, a linkage to innovation capacity, where we work with various hubs and acceleration centers in Kenya to be able to build capacity for the innovators. providing linkage to research institutions and universities, and also providing legal guidance to the innovators on matters to do with IP. Sixth is that we do linkage of the innovators to government funding programs. And lastly is providing that marketing opportunity for the innovators as the products get market ready. So specifically on the Whitebox Entrepreneur Project, it's a project, of course, by the government of Kenya, which is being done, or rather being spearheaded by the Ministry of ICT, Innovation and Youth Affairs, and implemented through the ICT Authority. And our main objective is to catalyze the successful growth of local ventures so that they are able to become world-class status. So like Karinda mentioned earlier, we are currently offering on this project a 3-month incubation support to a select of 20 growth stage and 150 early stage startups. And the project is actually funded by the UK Tech Hub and is being implemented by 3 partners. That is the Institute of Small Business Initiative from the Strathmore University, Circle Innovation, and the Kijiji. So what is it? What is in for the entrepreneurs from this particular project? One is to develop, we're able to impact skills training. This is specifically on entrepreneurship and business modeling for the various startups that we are currently incubating. We also provide peer-to-peer experience learning from a network of entrepreneurs. The other benefit for these entrepreneurs is mentoring of the innovators from an industry, from industry and subject matter experts. We also have networking sessions where the innovators are then linked with key partners and stakeholders. And finally is that we do have demo sessions where then the innovator or the entrepreneur is then able to pitch for their products and services and get facilitated for investment. So that's just a brief in terms of what the project is all about. In my session on Thursday, I'll be diving more deep into what the Huduma Whitebox is all about and some of the other programs that we are running through that. So back to you, Karina.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Kevin, for this brief introduction of the Whitebox program. So let me, really bad at multitasking. So let me share my screen again with all of you. So you might ask yourself how this topic is related kind of to the work we do with the Whitebox at the moment. So as part of the pilot program we are running right now, we are also conducting a research study on better understanding how funding opportunities and other support opportunities are communicated within the Kenyan startup ecosystem. So we are looking to understand both formal and informal communication channels between startups and startup enablers. And the goal of the research is to understand, first of all, the communication channels, but then more importantly, to find ways how we can break up silos and programs and initiatives that take place in isolation and where only specific communities of startups or specific startups kind of get access to over and over again, to open up opportunities to a broader range of both startup enablers as well as startups within the Kenyan ecosystem. So we currently, as part of that research, also run 2 surveys, one for key enablers and one for entrepreneurs, to better understand the information sources they use to both get information on programs and and funding and other opportunities, as well as the channels enablers use to share when they are running programs or when they have any opportunities for startups, and to see where kind of the gaps are and how we then can come in to sort out the gaps and bridge them going forward. And so on this background, it really was that in preparation of SANCALB, we realized, I guess, through conversations and also through our initial research, that there is a large topic on biases against local startup enablers. And so that's why we're super, super excited to have this panel this morning with kind of a couple of different stakeholders from the startup enabler side, associations, as well as funders, to dive a bit deeper into this topic this morning. So further ado, I'm going to introduce our MC for the session, Maurice Otieno, who's the Executive Director of Baraza Media Lab, and who will guide us through the panel discussion this morning. I will share the links to the surveys with you in the chat. So if you're a startup enabler or a startup in Kenya, please feel free to fill out the survey. It will take around 15 minutes and would really help us in better understanding the channels. With that being said, Maurice, over to you.
Hi guys, morning. As Karina said, my name is Maurice Otieno, the Executive Director at Baraza Media Lab, which is basically a new entity that is an incubator / co-working space for media-focused startups. Before that, I wore another hat, which was the part of the founding team and the general manager at Meta, which is at 14 Riverside. So that's the short intro about myself. I would like to just do one-line introduction of each and every panel. Then they can briefly tell you what they are doing within the organization, which I think is important to set the ground for why they are the right people to be on this call. So first, we have Sheena Raikundalia, who's Director UK Tech Hub. Then we have Jeremy Riro, who's a representative of the Association of Countrywide Hubs. And we have Muthoni, who's the program officer at Seagull Foundation. And lastly, we have Nekesa, who's the founding member of ASEC. So would we start the introductions in that order? If Sheena would go first, Jeremy, Muthoni, then Nekesa.
Great. Hi, everyone. So as Maurice said, my name is Sheena, and I'm the country director for the UK Kenya Tech Hub. So very briefly about the Tech Hub, we're a UK government initiative, so a tech hub set here in Kenya. There's a wider network of tech hubs. So whilst I lead Kenya in Africa, we also have Nigeria and South Africa, but more widely, there's India, Indonesia, Israel, and most recently Brazil, which I'm super excited about. So that's kind of, that's our international network of tech hub. And we work here at the British High Commission here in Upper Hill and really trying to work with the tech ecosystem. How do we help build skills and how do we build linkages? From my part, my definition of tech is very broad. And the first bucket, I divide into 3 buckets. The first bucket is what I like to call kind of, the cool tech, the sexy tech, which is all your blockchain, big data, drones. And we've seen already what a difference this can make in Kenya with COVID, but this is only 1%. So more boringly, my second bucket is tech as an enabler, where tech can be used to get, whether it's financial services, health, education, to those that need it the most. And thirdly, and some people might say the most boring, but I would say the most important, is operational tech, where tech can be used to help MSMEs and SMEs really grow and scale. So by range of this, it's really, really broad, and that's what we cover. My personal background is, this is my first kind of government funder role, but I used to be a lawyer in London for about 10 years, and I moved back to Kenya 7 years ago. I'm a failed startup founder, and also worked in the ecosystem enabling environment. I'll stop now.
Jeremy.
Hi everyone, my name is Jeremy Riro, and the hats I wear are few. One is the managing partner at FI Consult, which is a transaction advisory and strategy consulting firm based in Nairobi. And as part of FI Consult, we have FI Labs Innovation Hub, which is based in Kisii. Our focus there is to build an entrepreneurship and innovation ecosystem around Kisii and the surrounding counties. And FI Labs is a member of the Association of Countrywide Innovation Hubs. And so that's how I find myself sitting in this panel. And also, on the other hand, I'm part of ASEC. I'm the current treasurer to the board at ASEC. Thank you.
Did I beat you to it, Maurice?
Yeah, you did.
Okay, so my name is Modoni Gunjiri. I work with the Seagull Family Foundation as a program officer. Seagull Family Foundation is a US-based foundation that supports 250 grassroots organizations across sub-Saharan Africa. And why we are in this discussion is mainly because our philosophy of supporting these organizations is placing all our partners or our grantees at the center of our grant making processes. So if it does not work for the grantees, we are not doing it. And so that is a little bit about Seagull. But separate from that, I have been in the development space for 10 years now, different kind of components of the development sector, including climate change, including youth, including tech. So I'm really happy to be here and share some of the lessons I've learned over the years, but also learn from peer organizations.
And lastly, Nekesa.
Thank you, Maurice, and thank you to the organizers for having me. My name is Nekesa Wera, based in Nairobi, Kenya. I'm here primarily in my capacity as a founding member of ASEC, which is the Association of Startup and SME Enablers of Kenya. And our mission is to bring together and represent the interests of organizations that support the development and growth of startups and SMEs. But other than being a founding member of ASEC, I am also director of strategy at AfriLabs. And AfriLabs is a Pan-African network of innovation centers spread across the African continent. Obviously, we currently have a membership of 240 innovation centers spread across 48 African countries. And we support these innovation centers through capacity building and access to finance. And then finally, I am also a strategy advisor at Sandbox, which is based in Nairobi, Kenya. And what we do at Sandbox is that we are a collaborative space for SME experts that come in every day to support SMEs across Africa to build scalable solutions. And so I'll post the links to all the work that I do in the chat, and I'll be happy to engage after this.
Thank you. Thank you, Nekesa, for the many hats that you wear, yourself as well as Riro. I'm super excited to have this conversation because as you all can hear, these are people with immense experience within the sector and working with the startup enablers and funders themselves. Most importantly, I wanted to mention something about startup enablers. For most mature ecosystems in terms of startups, you find there's a lot of things that help them to grow the startup culture in that space. And one of them are co-working spaces, incubators, and accelerator programs. So that is going to be our main focus of this discussion today. That we don't confuse the word startup enablers. I know within the startup scene, there's a lot of jargons that are thrown around. So just interesting for us to set that record straight and just jump straight into it. Like, what are the kind of funding that are available for startup enablers out there? And I think I will start with Muthoni on this. Then we'll go to Nekesa.
So I'll definitely take you up on that, Maurice. The kind of funding that is available to startup enablers is quite wide. From our experience as Seagull Family Foundation, we usually provide flexible funding, and it could be flexible. That's one option. We do see a lot of other peer funders providing funding that's more like project focused or output focused. There is also space for especially the social enterprises to engage funders for debt financing, which is another option that's out there. But we've seen kind of the whole spectrum of financing to gravitate around one of those three. It's either grant funding that is restricted or unrestricted. There's also debt financing that takes different shapes and forms. But this is basically probably the gist of it.
Yeah, so I totally agree with Muthoni, and I think she has very appropriately covered it. From my experience, having been part of the leadership team for a hub or an ESO for about 8 years. For us, what were the primary sources of funding? Yes, was grant funding, but other than that, it would be, I think, what I would classify as self-funding. And so finding innovative ways that we could fundraise in order to run our operations. Within the ESO space, it's becoming increasingly difficult to get organizations like SIGAL that could potentially offer core funding. And what that means is that we are beginning to see a lot of hybrid innovation centers or ESOs, which, yes, will be open to grant funding, but then also there's going to be consulting arms that come up, there's going to be products that they sell, so they'll be offering a lot of solutions. So what I'm excited to increasingly see coming from ESOs is the self-funding model where they're basically commercializing and trying to make a way on their own.
Thanks, Nekesa. I mean, because sometimes when we talk about funding, people's mindset immediately jumps to VC funding, which, to be honest, communities and ESOs are not, in my own opinion, are not VC fundable, if that's a word. But I would also like to rope in that question back to just try and prolong that question and bring in Sheena and Jeremy in terms of straight into it. Are local enablers funded, or is there a bias that you've experienced?
I guess I could. Sorry, is it me first?
Yes.
Okay, great. Hi. You know, I've struggled with this question because what I didn't want is, you know, to kind of get into, you know, I know there was a lot of conversations around the expat versus local entrepreneur funding, and I don't want this conversation to get into that sphere. I think there is that layer above, which is the enabling layer, and as you mentioned, the ESOs, the community, which you said maybe is not kind of VC fundable. They're not those fundable models. But if you are sort of an impact investor, or you say you are, you know, you're doing philanthropy or you're doing grants, then surely these ESOs and these communities should be fundable, right? Because if you are doing something where you are trying to, you're trying to do social good, then potentially investing or funding or supporting this layer of ESOs has a multiplier effect. Than sometimes just even funding one startup, because one kind of ESO, one hub can potentially create a community around that area and support many entrepreneurs. So I think, first of all, thinking about when we say what's fundable, it depends on who you are. Are you, are you a donor? Are you an impact investor? Are you a commercial funder? And I think depending on who you are will depend on who you should fund. Now, back to the main question is, are there biases against local local organizations? And I think the answer is yes, to a certain extent. Now, are they like sort of out there, are there sort of, discriminatory on your face biases, or is it just, kind of indirect, or is it just more indirect rather than kind of direct, rather than sort of donors going out of their way to say, we don't want to fund local organizations? Is it more that actually the way donor funding is, or the way this funding occurs has, means that local enablers might not hear about the opportunities, or if they hear about the opportunities, they're not able to apply for them, or they're not able to meet the requirements. So I don't think there's a direct funding bias in the sense that people are saying, we don't want to fund local startups or local startup enablers or local organizations, but maybe the way this funding happens, whether it's through networks, whether it's through these open call for tenders or whatever, means that there is a bias where local enablers might not hear about these opportunities, or if they hear about it, they might self-count themselves out and think this is not for me, or they might not actually know how to, kind of apply for them. I'll stop there.
Riro, if you do have any input on that, please go ahead. If you don't, it's okay.
I definitely have input on that, being a person who runs an innovation hub in this country, and we are trying to raise funding from different sources. So the straight answer is a simple yes, there's bias, and we cannot hide from that. The question then becomes, and this is me wearing my kind of strategy and critical thinking hat, what causes this bias? And how does it come about? First of all, everyone will agree, and on the main street, you'll hear people saying there's the ratio bias, which I would classify as social. there's some money that is pursuing some race. We can discuss that over and over. And Sheena said that's not the topic today, so we're not going to go there. What I would like to look at more is the other, what I call the BS kind of bias, which is first. The first BS is the balance sheet bias, and the second BS is the bank statement bias. And this goes back to what Muthoni was saying. If I'm going to get debt, then my balance sheet has to support that. If my balance sheet as a local enabler is not big enough, and there's some $1 million US coming in, and my balance sheet reads $20,000 US, definitely I'm not qualifying for that. So there'll be a bias, but not an intentional bias, because the kind of support that wants the international donors want to see, the impact they want and the size of funding they have, I cannot absorb it. I cannot, run with it. So that's a balance sheet kind of bias. The other one, the bank statement bias, this comes in when you're applying for these grants, and they want to see your capability. Have you handled this amount of money before? And there are several instances and interactions that I've had with different enablers who are in the ecosystem trying to fundraise. And that comes also as an issue that your bank statement is too small, and so you have not handled this amount of money. And that's a technical knockout that you get. Not necessarily because you're not as good as the international organizations that get the donors, the funding, but because basically you have not demonstrated that you can handle that amount of money. And coming from a finance background as a finance professional, I think those two BS biases are really valid, and there are things that we need to look around. How do we solve those? Because truth be told, for enablers outside Nairobi, and I'm speaking as one who runs a hub in Kisii, they don't have big balance sheets and they don't have big bank statements. They are running on lean budgets. So how do you still work with them? And we can demonstrate how you can do that, because there are few who are already working with international funders. And I can mention here, without any fears, Elder Hub, they're doing some good job in Eldoret. They're out of Nairobi, but they're doing some good work there. So how can we structure things that can work? And again, I don't see a problem with an international organization getting the funding and working with a local enabler in the first phase to prove the model and to prove the capability and build the capacity for the local enabler. And then in the next phase, we have the local enabler now getting the funding directly. So those kind of models are the ones that we should be talking about. So I know I've ran so fast into the solution kind of thing. That's how I'm wired. But yes, there's a bias, but the bias is not just the way we sit on Main Street in terms of money's coming to the expatriates. We should also interrogate ourselves as enablers locally. Do we have the balance sheets? Do we have the bank statement, which most of us don't have? Then do we have the capacity? Do we understand the procurement procedures, the proposal writing kind of skills? Do we have such? And I think that's where now those gaps, if we fill them, then we can start now seeing how we can play at the same level. Thanks.
So you unpack a lot of issues that were going to be answered in my next question, which was actually, what is the hindrance to guys accessing this funding, type of pot of funding, either project-based or grant-based, or but I would like to look at it this way. It's almost like a double-edged sword, in the sense that you need this funding to enable to build internal capabilities, right? Hire the right people, of course, build your balance sheet and your bank statement. But at the same time, you can't get a job if you don't have that. So it's almost like, and as Sheena said, also some of the projects require 15 years of leading innovation, or 25 years of leading innovation in your organization. And correct me if I'm wrong, Nekesa, but I think Kenya is less than 20 years in terms of structured type of ecosystem building. I have been one of the first ones. So for somebody to ask you for 15 years, have they not cut you short in the knee? So I'm just thinking, what are the interventions that somebody in Kisii, Jeremy, and Muthoni, I'd like to pull you in on this, because I know you work a lot with people who are not within Nairobi and the cities mostly. What interventions do they have in order to build their credibility in order to access funding at SIGO. Because again, they get pulled into very many things and they forget their focus, and their value is questioned by the market because they've forgotten their focus. What interventions have you, as Muthoni within SIGO Foundation, had in order to bring them at least alive? Yeah, so Muthoni, Jeremy, and Sheena would like to talk about what you've done also with Eldo Hub, and I know you're working also with Countrywide Hub. What are some of the things that you've seen that are enabling them to thrive so that they can be seen?
Thank you, Maurice. I think from the SIGO experience, what we've seen, and just to touch on what Jeremy was mentioning earlier, is that indeed there is a bias. We conducted in 2016 our own survey of on our partners and found that the expatriate-led organizations tended to grow 2 times faster than local-led ones, given that they started with us at the same level of funding, same level of budget, and with more or less the same resources. So there's definitely a bias. We then resulted to starting a fellowship program specifically for African-led initiatives and organizations. We call it the Africa Visionary Fellowship. And through the fellowship, we've learned a couple of lessons that have helped us identify what are those kind of winning formula or nice ingredients to a local organization that allows them to attract or to bring in funding quite quick. One is articulation of vision, articulation of impact. Being able to communicate what it is you do has been, cannot be understated. We found that organizations that are able to communicate really well, but not just communicate well. Communication here means a lot of things. It means being able to understand what is your impact in the first place and why should anyone care about it. Because when you are an organization that has a school feeding program in West Pokot, and you're talking to a funder who has lived in Colorado all their lives, they need to understand what the context in West Pokot looks like. Why is this important? Why should we care about it? And then secondly, it is also being able to understand the game. And here I mean the game that is the donor dance, or that is the lingo that seems to allow a wide variety of stakeholders in the development space to understand what it is that you're working towards. There is a lingo, and we don't like it, but it is there. And we found that organizations that are able to understand what that lingo is, that are able to use it in their pitching, in their even if it is just creating communication materials, they are able to get ahead a bit more than others that don't. So there is a space to say, how is this donor dance played, and how can we engage in that donor dance? But also, hopefully, with time, once we gain relevance and influence, we can influence the donor dance to one that puts local organizations at a place where they are better understood, but also that funders and other funding organizations are able to look at us and say, okay, I understand because I saw that organization and this is how they've grown over the years, and we understand what your context is, we understand what impact you're looking towards. That's what I'd say for now.
I was seeing Nekesa smiling, and the question that I have: do you think even after the work that SIGO Foundation are doing in terms of offering fellowships, I know Agidias, I'd like to give a shout out to Agidias because I know they are working with Village Capital to do some training for ESOs across East Africa. Do you think, is that enough? And for context, I might have a lot of information, but do you think that's enough for local ESOs to get work, either project-based or grant funding? It's one thing, and I really appreciate what Muthoni and the team are doing, but do you think that's enough from your perspective, Nekesa?
Well, the reason that I was smiling is when Muthoni talked about there's a time to do this basically dance to a tune, right? And until we get to a place where we now are able to make demands, or we are able to be self-sufficient, right? And I don't know, perhaps I'm living in a utopia, but I'm wondering why that time is not now. What right now is preventing donors to think outside of the box in terms of how to engage with us? What is preventing donors right now from actually being at the same table with innovators, with enablers, and having conversations, basically appreciating and acknowledging the fact that as enablers, we are perhaps together with the innovators and the entrepreneurs in our communities closest to a lot of the challenges that they seek to fund. And then from that perspective, then beginning a conversation of how do we do this? I'm uneasy with the fact that we currently are stuck in this box. So there's this field and we're told this is where you play and this is the script and this is how you do it. And I feel that there's no time like the present to remove ourselves from that box. And I'll give one quick example before I stop. One box is the terminologies that we use. We could be talking at the same table, but their terminologies, Adona's terminology might be different from my terminology as an expert, as an enabler. Take, for example, poverty or the word poor. For some donors, not having running water in your homestead, that is one key indicator of poverty. But what if this villager who doesn't have running water in his or her homestead also has 3,000 head of cattle? Is that villager still poor? It really depends on who's telling that story. The villager, I've got 3,000 heads of cattle, man. I'm living the life. Some donors look at that villager with absolutely no running water and they have to walk miles on end to get water. So that is poverty. So I feel that there are these boxes that we've been placed in that we need to urgently get out of and then go to these conversation tables as peers and not with begging bowls, and really have a conversation as the people that are closer to the solutions, to the challenges, and basically list and share examples and give recommendations of how things should work, because we know what has worked and what hasn't worked. And I'm done.
Thank you. And you bring in a question that I've been pondering around in terms of like an ecosystem is built with various people. So on this call, we have from donors to implementers to communities to government. And the key role, we've seen a lot of government interventions through the startup bill, the ever surviving ICT practitioners bill come back. And these are interventions to kind of help the tech space to sanitize per se. I don't know if they are doing that, but the question that I would like to ask is, and this might be directed to Sheena, is you supported under UK Tech Hub a lot of enablers. As a government representative, because in this case you're representing the UK government, do you think there's room for even Kelvin, who is at ICT right now, to work more with locals and enable it as our government? Do you see that room? And what are the learning that you're getting representing the UK government working with Kenyan ecosystem players? What are you getting from a learning perspective?
Yeah. No, I mean, thanks, Maurice and Nekesa. So many things to respond and discuss. I think you really hit the nail on quite a lot of things, but I'll respond to sort of Maurice quickly on the direct question from a kind of UK government perspective. Just do thumbs down if you can't hear me, because I keep getting sort of messages saying my internet connection is unstable. But basically, So as UK Kenya Tech Hub, and for those of us who don't, for those of you who are not familiar, I am really having bad internet issues, but I'll put a link to our third newsletter, which will basically show you the kind of work we've been doing. So we've worked with, I'd say we've delivered over 20 projects in the last 18 months. And I've worked with more local organizations than I have international organizations. We've done a mix, and some of them we've been mentioning on the chat is like Eldo Hub, a hub in Eldoret, which we're working on a digital apprenticeship program, etc. And I'll tell you some of the things. It is difficult as a donor, because as a government, because we are, as much as we talk about the lingo, the point is we're responsible for UK taxpayers' money. So I have to be able to account for UK taxpayers' money and know that the money that I'm spending doesn't actually get, you know, if it's a small organization, maybe it doesn't survive or whatever it is. So there are bigger kind of risk issues, which is why, and I know this is the easy answer and the lazy answer is you have those kind of criteria, which Jeremy was kind of saying, the big bank balances, etc. So I think one, you know, it's clear to understand. I mean, it's one thing to say, why are they doing this? It's time to have a change, which I agree with, which is why we're having this discussion. But I think there needs to be this kind of sense of, let's put people in, let's understand why are they doing what they're doing. And once you kind of understand the why, you can address it. So is the lingo because actually maybe whichever family has given you the money, or if it's taxpayers, there's certain key priorities that they want to see met. Now, those priorities might not be what our priorities in this country are. That's when the dialogue comes in, to make them realize you need to kind of change your mind. The point is, there is a power dynamic. It's people who have money that are giving it to people who don't have money, right? So and as much as we're uncomfortable about that power dynamic, that dynamic is there and we have to acknowledge it. Now, what are the ways around it to make sure that that money is used for the benefit of the people who are giving it? Maybe it's vanity metrics. Maybe they just want to make themselves feel good. So when they host their next dinner party, they can say, this village had no water, taking Nikessa's example, and I gave them water. And maybe that's what it is. It's just a vanity tick. Or maybe they are actually people who really, really want to help and are just making the mistake and don't know how, or don't understand the concept, in which this kind of dialogue has to be had. So I think there's like there's sort of a line, and you have to figure out where people are. From my experience of what I've done, so I'm British, but I'm Kenyan, and I've been, I was born here. My grandfather moved here from India, so technically I'm also Indian, so I'm a global citizen. But basically, when I moved back and took over this role, I've hired, I know this space, SME startups. I've hired a local team, really familiar, they really know the tech environment. So it's much easier for me to do these projects and actually work with local enablers and work with, whether it's countrywide association or whether it's all these different hubs, because I'm here on the ground. I know who they are, what they're doing, and I'm able to work with them and monitor. So I think that really helps, being on the ground. When you're fly in, fly out, you can't understand that context. Right? So maybe the question is, where are the local donors, right? Like, we have quite a large, if you look at the number of wealthy people in Kenya itself and in Africa, that number is going high. So maybe it's also saying, let's get local organizations, because then once they support it, then again, that level of trust can then pass to the international organizations. I'm not saying that's the only answer, but let's also look at different ways of how we can do this. A few things that I've said is, who has to adjust? Is it the startup enablers have to adjust? Or is it the donors who have to adjust? And I think the answer is a bit of both. There are things that donors definitely have to do to adjust, and there are things that startup enablers have to do to adjust. And I think let's have that conversation and dialogue as to what is possible, because I think it's true, the time is now. What can we adjust in? I'll give you some examples of some really simple things. Stop with the closed tendering. If there is a tender, out there to the world, every single one of our programs, we open tendered, which was horrific in terms of work because of the number of applications that came through. But that's our job, and we had to do that extra work. But on top of that, what I realized is so many disqualified because they didn't meet basic things like, you need to respond by this date, the email has to have this. And I know they might sound like silly things, but that's how you then, when you have a lot of applications, that's how you judge. So also from the other side, follow instructions. The timeline is not a guidance. It's, you have to apply by this date and you have to do it on that format. So I think, so some things that donors can do is make it open, not just to my 3 or 4 preferred people. And then think through some of the criteria. Is it biased? So for example, if we're asking for 20 years experience in an innovation ecosystem, that's clearly unfair. Nobody in Kenya is going to have, well, not nobody, but it's going to be more difficult to have that. So yeah, we also have to think through what are the criteria that are really, really, they shouldn't be there, and feedback, so that again, donors can start changing their minds and having that dialogue. So all I'm saying is, I think you know, and some of the best projects that I've seen are where there've been partnerships within sort of international, not even international, like I'd say like some between local, even if it's outside of Nairobi and Nairobi, or international and local partners, and they've delivered the most. And I'll tell you, in terms of project management, also, sometimes when you don't have that experience, you don't know the project management, the impact reporting. It's a pain, it's a nightmare. Like a lot of local partners will struggle because they've not had to do it, and they won't understand why. And also sometimes even we'll be like, oh my God, like we're adding such a burden to them. But that's also part of our reporting criteria. Maybe that's what needs to be changed. Maybe that's the lingo, Muthoni, you mentioned in terms of how do you report your impact. But these are key questions because we're taking other people's money and we have a responsibility to those money. Now, maybe the assumptions are wrong, but they're there for a reason. And I think understanding the why and which ones we can break would be the way forward. But I'll stop there. I'm unfortunately not being able to share on my screen because I've got really bad internet, but I'm hoping somebody from my team can share like our sort of channels and newsletters, because that's where we publish all our opportunities. Whether you're local, it doesn't matter. Everybody can and should apply. So that's step one, I think. Yeah. Open that access to opportunities to everyone, not just people who know donors or know governments.
Okay, so open tendering, and both have to adjust in order to be able to grow the space itself. From a community perspective, Jeremy and Nekesa, Nekesa as founding team of ASEC, which is an umbrella body of SME and startup enablers in the country. And Jeremy, as a representative of the Association of Countrywide Enablers, which are basically enablers who are outside major cities, if I may say. And for context, these two are together, but they also have very unique challenges individually. I'd like to, what is your role? What is your role in just ensuring that either from an information perspective, from both for funders and the enablers, from a talent perspective? Because as someone who has led and still leading a community, one of the key things that you find is there's some special skill sets that you need for people who are in this service. I call it a service industry because they're dealing a lot with people's problems. Service and therapy, because people come to you for direction, I'm not, my business is not doing well. Funders are looking for investees, and you have to be like this person who's absorbing all this. What do you think is your role as ASEC and as Countrywide App to both funders and the enablers? And Nekesa, first.
Thank you. Well, I feel the first role for organizations like ASEC and Countrywide Innovation Hubs is enlightening enablers. And so Sheena rightfully said that for sure there's going to be some form of bias because this is taxpayers' money. And I appreciate that. It may not necessarily be something that the entire collective of enablers, for whatever reason, will appreciate. The role of organizations like ASEC is to actually make that clear. And so enlighten the enablers, and while we're at it, give them different pathways. So yes, this kind of funding is restricted because there's a low appetite for risk because it's taxpayers' money. However, if you go to the Seagull Family Foundation, for example, these are the increasing number of opportunities that would be available for you. I remember with the Innovation Hub that I was running very, very, very long time ago, we one time got this funding that needed for us to hire almost another 5-6 people just to get us to a place where we could actually account for it. And so in retrospect, maybe that wasn't a wise decision to make, to get funding. It wasn't that much in the first place, and then have to hire people to help you report for how you used it, right? So just enlightening enablers is one. And then developing those different pathways. What can we as ASEC and other associations that are collectives of enablers, what can we do so it's easy for enablers and funders to find each other? So are there other opportunities to convene around more agile ways of funding that are not restricted, because it's taxpayers' money? Again, like Sheena said, and I absolutely agree, we need to be creative around how does that happen. It's something that Affilabs, that one of the organizations that I work with, is something that they're doing through their Catalyst program. And so we have a partnership with the Africa Business Angel Network, where basically they use the hubs as an intermediary to find startups that they would be interested in funding. And once that match is made, we then have a pool of money from a funder, which is the French Development Agency, that is able to match those funds, right? Definitely not as restrictive as other funds. So that's two, finding different pathways. And then three is continuously democratizing the innovation and entrepreneurship space, right? And I feel that this is where ASEC and the countrywide innovation hubs together can be extremely powerful. When people land in Kenya, it's great and it's easy to begin in Nairobi. But what if we're able to spotlight on work that other hubs are doing? What is Sote Hub doing? What is Lake Hub doing? What is Elder Hub doing? What is Swahili Pot doing? And so on and so forth. And basically making the case. And like Muthoni said, showing value for why that work is important and why you want to be a part of it now. And so these are ways that as associations, we can democratize the innovation and entrepreneurship space. Yeah, and I'm done speaking.
Riro?
Yeah, I think Nekesa put it correctly, that there's work to be done by the associations. And I'm looking at the money and trying to follow the money. There's someone who has money and they want to get reports on how the money was used. They want to achieve some goals. And I'm the person on the ground who is trying to help them achieve those goals as the enabler. And what they want is the assurance that the money is going to be used properly. And so what are they trying to look for in an association or an enabler that they are going to fund? They're trying to look at the governance systems in that association. Are they people that can be trusted? Like Muthoni mentioned, these are people who are far away. They want to believe that if you have proper systems, then the money will be safe. These people, when they're doing the application, Sheena mentioned that, are they missing out on technical details that probably they could be having, but they're just not keen on when they're doing the application? And that's where now the association, the umbrella bodies now come in place, the countrywide, the countrywide association, and then the ASEC also at a national level, in terms of trying to see how now do we bring these enablers together and teach them, or actually literally teach them. How do you do these things? How do you put together a good application? And what are the technical details that you should not miss? How do you communicate your story so that it aligns with whatever impact whoever is funding wants to achieve on the ground? So I would classify all that as kind of knowledge bucket. There is a knowledge element that the associations have to play a role there. I would want to use the word capacity building, but I find it misused. So I would just call it knowledge. Just make sure these people have proper knowledge on what they need to do when they are getting this funding. The other aspect is also still under knowledge, but helping them in putting in place those governance systems. You'll find a very passionate young person somewhere in Makueni or like me from TC, and you really want to do good impact on the ground. And all you care about is, I'm seeing a gap here, I can work with these entrepreneurs and innovators. I know nothing about finances, financial reporting. I know nothing about putting together proposals. I'm all alone. I know nothing about having a board or people who provide oversight. And I think as an association, once you have all these members and you know where they are and you know their gaps, it's the responsibility of the associations to make sure that they have been equipped with the necessary skills that they need and the knowledge in terms of putting together those governance systems and processes, so that even an external person when they come, they are able to trust you. Even if you are small, they're able to see you are small, but you're managing your affairs in an orderly way. And so I can trust you with, probably I might not give you $1 million, but probably I can give you, let's say, $100,000 to begin with, and then we can scale it up over time. So that goes back to the enablers themselves. What can we do? We should bite what we can chew. I mean, if you are running a balance sheet, again, I'm a finance person, so money matters. If you are running a balance sheet of 100,000 Kenyan shillings and you're applying for a grant of $2 million, then there is a disconnect. And it might not really make sense to whoever is giving you funding. So learning to bite what we can chew and then scaling up is one way to think about it. But again, without missing the point of what should the associations, the umbrella associations do. on the other aspect of the two BSs that I talked about, the balance sheet and the bank statements. Now, the associations are very good at consolidation or syndication of this kind of small enablers in a certain region. There could be a 1 million fund. It's targeted to Western Kenya. And you know, there's Lake Hub there near the lake. There's File Labs in Kisii. There's Mashinani in Nyamira. There's Eldo Hub in Eldoret. And you want to cover that region. And instead of coming with a foreigner from I don't know where to come and do that work in that region and then subcontract the same local guys, the associations should take the initiative to bring these guys together. Again, show that they have the systems and the processes that are needed. And if they don't have, help them in putting them in place. And then the association now can present these guys and be a voice for these guys who might not have the voice in terms of bidding for these projects. If it's $1 million, probably it can come to the whole of Western Kenya region, but through all these different hubs under one umbrella body. And I think that's the other way in which the association now can come to help and solve this problem of the balance sheets and the bank statements, which is not going to go away anyway.
Yeah. Thank you, Rira and Nekesa on that. I know this is a very interesting discussion and you can go on and on and on. I would like to remind the audience online that you can ask your questions on the Q. We have a Q&A function there, then we can look into it in the next, let's say 5 minutes. But I had a question to Muthoni in terms of the support that you do offer some of the association, the ESOs that you're working with, over and beyond like the good work that I've seen you're doing in terms of the fellowship. Would you like to just talk a little bit more about that? And then also, because for me as somebody who has run a space, there was always that question that we were being asked every single time in terms of like, how can we show our impact? And if you have a team of 3 people, one is the one who's at the front desk, one is the one who's serving coffee, you are in a suit as the managing director, but at the same time, you're the sales, marketing, and operations person. You don't have time for impact. You don't have time to measure the good work that you're doing. So I was wondering, like, is that part of some of the work that you're supporting, some of the people that you grant in terms of just measuring the impact and being able to articulate it very well?
Yes, Maurice, I'm just smiling as you're talking about the 3-person team where the secretary is also the T girl, is also the M&E manager. We totally understand and I absolutely relate to what you're talking about. Maybe if I can speak a little bit of about the kind of support we give at SIGO, besides flexible grant funding, we normally offer technical assistance that really takes the shape of that beautiful word, capacity building, which is essentially we coming in and saying, okay, let's have a conversation about where you are as an organization, and then let's see what gaps do you have in the organization that are deterring you from growing. Because what we've learned over the years that money is great, money is awesome, but it is not everything. There's a space for providing support that can allow the organization to look internally and learn and fill those gaps that are deterring them from growth. One of those gaps, coincidentally, is impact measurement. A lot of organizations are always asking, how can we get better at this? Because impact measurement and fundraising are like the chicken and the egg. For you to do fundraising well, you need to have known what your impact is and how to measure it. And for you to do that well, you need more money, which means you need to fundraise more. So it's a vicious cycle that just keeps going. But it is imperative that organizations understand how can you articulate your impact at the stage you are at, right? So I wouldn't expect an organization that's been in existence for 3 years with a budget that's modest to be able to start talking about having done RCTs about the work they do. That would be that would not be appropriate for the size of organization they are and stage they're at. But what makes sense for the organization that has been around for 2 years and has that team of 2 or 3 and is able to say, we have done our program, we have run this model for this duration of time, and so far, this is what we are seeing. So it's also understanding what makes sense to articulate, what can we actually confidently vouch for about our work at the stage of growth we are at. But on the flip side, on the donor side, there's something we are encouraging our funder friends to do, and it's to really come with a learning mind when it comes to funding doers of the ground or enablers. It is not coming with a preconceived idea of what impact should look like. Rather, allow yourself to be taken on a journey of understanding, for this organization working in this context, this is what impact looks like. And this is what they can realistically achieve in the next few years. So this is something we are encouraging donors to come with a beginner's mind and say, though we funded 200 health organizations in the past 10 years, because we are getting into this new organization in a context we've not come into, let us come ready to learn rather than ready to impose. Because at the end of the day, the enablers, these organizations, they're the experts on the ground, and there should not be a situation where they feel, or donors feel like, oh, I have funded 2 organizations in Mombasa, therefore you working in Mount Elgon, you should also look like this. This is something we are actively trying to promote funders to do and to think about a lot harder.
Thank you so much. So I will also urge again the audience to go on the comment section. There's a lot of gems being pushed there, so just go there and check what is going on. We have 2 questions.
Sorry, Maurice. Sorry, Maurice, to interrupt.
Yes,
I just wanted to say something to just compliment what Muthoni was saying, because I really agree with that, and I think it's a really important topic. Sorry to interrupt. But
it's okay.
Exactly what you said about the impact thing, I think, and having an open mindset. I think one other thing, startup enablers, you know what, the insights that you have and the work that you've done in the 3-person team, that's new for us. That's insights. So you guys might think it's just everything. So you don't even talk about it. You don't even mention it. But if you're working with 3 entrepreneurs and you've noticed, this entrepreneur is having this issue or whatever. I mean, sometimes I think, that kind of, what we say is impact, or what we want reported is what we set the scene, or donors say report it this way, and therefore you report it this way. And then what happens is all these insights that you're gathering actually doesn't get passed back. And then donors don't realize all the other stuff that you're doing that they've not been able to capture. So if you want them to change their reporting metrics and stuff, again, don't feel shy to kind of give your insights. And I'm telling you this from a personal level, from all the projects that we've learned. Some of the things, the insights that our enablers give us once they're working with entrepreneurs and stuff, it's for us, it's amazing. We're like, they pick up on patterns, or they notice this. So feel free to actually not report, but using the word report back on the things that you've seen. For donors, especially those donors that are sitting internationally, those will be like key insights. So key insights, key learnings. He'll be like, that's not an insight, that's not learning. Like, I remember I used to do this a lot, but I'd be like, how is this learning? It's so obvious to us, or people who are on the ground, but don't undermine what you guys are doing. Anything that you're doing whilst you're doing this program, anything that you've noticed, anything that you've learned, or any trends that you're seeing, make sure you report those back and communicate, not even report, communicate those back, because those are the kind of things which will make donors on the other side realize, oh, maybe what I'm asking them is wrong. Look at what they're capturing. So it's a 2-way thing. It's a dialogue. I definitely think impact and impact metrics is a big area because, as Muthoni said, it is a chicken and the egg, but it doesn't have to be that way. Even with your 3-person team, you can demonstrate your impact. It might not be in the way, that is expected, or that's the normal way, but you can definitely demonstrate that. So sorry that I had to interrupt, but I think it's a really, really important point.
No, thank you so much, Sheena, for adding that. I think the point there is just over-communicate your insights. You can't go less on that. Just over-communicate anything that you have internally. It might be the thing that most people are looking at. I'd also like just to highlight this. It's not all grim and gloom within our community. You've seen the community evolve over time. And I usually give thanks to the iHub as part of the founding fathers of the structuring the ecosystem. You can see now people have become even more specialized in terms of the communities that they're addressing. I can see Pat Okelo commenting from Kayana, specializing specifically on women. There's Utu specializing on blockchain. There's a lot of specializations that are moving forward, which is a good thing for the community. Kijiji specializing also with only social enterprises. So I'll go down to the questions right now. Oh, sorry, I also forgot women work, also specializing with work around women. Do you see a case for consolidation, mergers among local enablers, hence creating economies of scale? Who would want a take on this? Because I have my own opinion. Riro?
Please, let me take it on. And your opinion, I don't want to preempt your opinion, but yeah, from where I see it, I think it's a good thing to look at and consider, because like I said, you don't have the capacity to absorb a certain amount of money, and the funder has that amount of money, and there's a certain goal they have within that budget here. So they cannot come down to give you 50,000 US dollars when they have a budget for that year for 1 million. So they still need to achieve their goals and impact. So local enablers coming together, working together is a key thing. But there lies the challenge of quote unquote competition, and who will shine more, who will be seen more. And trying to use now the umbrella bodies to kind of manage that in terms of, we are here to work and build an ecosystem. We're not here to compete against each other. Is a good channel for me, and I think the countrywide association and the ASEC can play a really good role in terms of trying to reduce the competition mindset and bring in the ecosystem thought process, and then build the scale. So at an individual level, probably I might not be able to talk to each other, to my neighbor there, and try to compete. But if the associations can come in and help direct that conversation, then I think that would be the first step towards the consolidation.
Nekesa, I see you've raised your brown hand.
Yes, I think there's room for something. I think the jury is still out on whether or not it takes the form of mergers or acquisitions and so on. But there definitely is the room for a lot more collaboration than is happening now. And I increasingly am buying into the whole concept of shared value, which is basically finding a way that the core thing that you do plugs into a wider mission with people that are like-minded, right? So how does the work that I'm doing as AfriLabs impact my community, and how does the work that Single are doing impact that same community, and how can we together make that happen even more, right? And I feel that within the local ecosystem, certainly in Kenya, potentially across the continent, we're beginning to see that working. I mean, one of my highlights was when Nairobi Garage and Meta announced, you know, their collaboration, basically cross-pollinating their communities, right? And I feel we really need to begin. So for me, it even goes beyond the bank balances. It just goes beyond. It goes towards, if we are honestly in this for the right reasons. If we're saying that we are actually enabling, because a lot of people that work within the space are not necessarily enabling, but if you're saying that we are enabling and that we have this value that we are bringing to the table, then for me, it would be a no-brainer that you want to work with other people that are bringing value to the table as well. So for sure, there is a lot of room for that to happen a lot more.
Yeah, I do think there's room, same here. I do think there's room, and I'm happy that you mentioned the Meta and Nairobi Garage collaboration, because again, it goes down to the point that I had mentioned earlier about specialization. You find Meta had become this go-to place for events around entrepreneurship and programming around that, and content basically. And Nairobi Garage is the largest co-working space, I can say, in Eastern Central Africa, before Noshken comes up in Rwanda. But with that said, you could see a direct correlation in terms of them just working together and collaborating to be able to benefit the community as a whole. And I like the language that you've used, Nekesa, in terms of you have to be almost like-minded. We've also seen, which leads me to the last question that we have, which is the bigger question around entrepreneurship and why is Nigerian firms and startups have successfully tapped into foreign capital and expansion. And I think also that could speak to iHub being acquired by CC Hub or merging with CC Hub, which is Nigerian. So why has that been able to happen? Yet we've, I think Women Work also collaborates or merged with a community also in Nigeria, if I'm not wrong. But why has that been able to happen? Do you guys have any perspective in terms of why that has happened and what are we missing? Who wants to take that first? I think this one I'll need you, Nekesa, to talk because you see it from oh yeah, ISIS responded, the Nigerian company. Yeah. So I'll need your response, Nekesa, because you see it from an AfriLab perspective. And Muthoni, because I know Seagull is also across the region. Have you seen any kind of mergers, acquisitions, or even collaborations? And why do you think it has worked or not worked? Yeah.
I'll ask Sheena go first because I think I saw her raise her hand.
Oh.
Yeah, sorry, I can't seem to find the button to raise my virtual hand, so I thought let me just raise my physical hand. Thanks, Nekesa.
Okay, Sheena, go.
I'll go really
first,
quickly.
then...
One of the really quickly, quick question. I mean, are we saying that it is foreign capital that are going? Because one of the things that I'm seeing in Nigeria and looking at my Nigerian Tech Hub counterpart is local Nigerians are funding local Nigerian startups and stuff. So there's a lot of that give back that is also happening. I think it's happening in Kenya, but and I can't speak for the Nigerian ecosystem, obviously, but some of the conversations that we were having within the Nigeria, South Africa and Kenyan Tech Hub was kind of around that. And I think, you know, in Nigeria, there is a lot of, kind of, focus on local founders, local enablers, but also local funding as well. And I think that's one slight difference that I wanted to raise and just question. I mean, isn't that also one of the reasons to kind of take into account? But definitely, I think Nekesa, Muthoni, ISIS are probably better to answer that question. But I wanted to throw that kind of context in.
Yes, I agree with Sheena to some extent. I believe that there was a study that was done and it was found that Nigeria and South Africa are able to attract a lot more venture capital into to local organizations in those countries than Kenya. I think Kenya, you're at something like 6%, whilst the other two were at 56 and something close to that. I think there's a lot of Nigerians abroad who are happy to give to Nigerian organizations in Nigeria, run by Nigerians. But I do think that it could be an issue of also positioning of the country as a whole. Nigeria is a very big economy, and I think that has contributed to a large extent towards the efforts of attracting funding, especially from venture capitalists across the world. There is space, though, to have a more nuanced conversation about how it is that Kenyan organizations can also take advantage of that, because we do have also quite a lot of money that comes into the country from the diaspora. How is it that can be channeled in some way to organizations that work here? We already do a lot of work locally. We already have organizations that are ready for this kind of funding. It's just that what's the structure that brings these two pieces together? I think there's space to also have a conversation around that.
Yeah, my quick 2 cents is, first of all, absolutely agree with what Muthoni and Sheena have said. The only other thing that I would add is that we need to expand. So it feels that perhaps where that question or what other people are sensing might be basically using that as a measure of success of an ecosystem. I feel we need to expand what those measures of success are. Right. So yes, if we put on a graph how much local investment is coming in from local funders and so on, we begin to see that disparity. But what are the other markers? What kind of impact do Kenyan businesses have? So perhaps not everyone is going to get acquired, or not everyone is going to exit. But what kind of impact do they have within the within the local community? The funding that's coming in, even if it's not from funders, how is that being distributed across the ecosystem, and what kind of impact is that kind of funding having? I don't have an entire list of what those markers could be, but I feel that we need to get to where we are increasing the number of markers. Perhaps one of those markers is how many women get employed, how many women founders do we have, how many businesses are launched out of that kind of funding by people with disabilities. There's so many markers of success that I feel we need to begin to interrogate even more.
I just would like to put a caveat that we are still communicating about funding for ESO. So just so that you all know that. But I think also there's a role that should be played by local corporates. We've not talked about that, and maybe it was intentional or unintentional, because they do stuff, but not maybe to the magnitude that is able to have a systemic change. But I would also like to look at people like Liquid Telecom, who have been supporting a lot of these entrepreneur support organizations with the bandwidth, internet, Safaricom, and the rest. But I think there's a place there as a place where people can start building support locally from their own resources. Now, I don't know if we have any other question, because we are coming up pretty fast to our end of the chat. Yeah, so I would like to just first of all thank you all for joining today's conversation. And I think we would easily have done 4 hours, but since we all have other things to do, I think we'll cut it short over here. I would like to just take it back to Karina to have sort of like a last word as we all depart and go about the day. Karina.
Great. Thank you so much, Morris. And also thank you to our fantastic panelists, Sheena, Jeremy, Muthoni, and Nikisa. I think this was super insightful, a great discussion, and it also is to show that this topic is more than relevant, and probably that this should be just a starting conversation of a lot of conversations and follow-up conversations, as it is such a relevant topic. And I think there are a lot of learnings from what you shared that we can take away for the audience, for all the questions you asked throughout the discussion, and for joining us today for this panel discussion. Please feel free to stay in touch with us. So you can reach us via the Whitebox at the kijiji.co.ke email. I'll also share that with all of you in the chat just right now. And also just a gentle reminder of the 2 surveys we are running at the moment. So we would highly appreciate if you took the time to fill out either the startup, the entrepreneur survey, or the key enabler survey, because it will help us to make some movements towards breaking up silos and communication channels going forward as part of this project as well. And then if you have any questions or want to learn how you can be involved in the Whitebox as an entrepreneur or also as a partner, as our email. So with that being said, I want to thank you all for your time and hope you have a lovely afternoon. Thank you very much.